Hey everybody, it is September 8th for episode 6 of Tacet Thoughts, which we have discovered is the number one percussion podcast, according to no relevant research data, but we'll just assume it. With me today is Chris Nadeau. How you doing, Chris?
Nope.
Nope. Dude, I feel the same way. It's been a long day, dude.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
And with us today is a really cool guest, a friend of ours and a colleague from A&M Commerce, another Brian Zader student. He's a composer and percussionist from Austin, Texas, whose recent collaborations include a steel pan recital series with the LNK New Music Collective, a composition for Diana Loomer's Melodic Timpani project, and performances around the Austin area as a part of Larkspur Percussion Duo. He actively works to facilitate the creation and performance of new music. In the 2017-18 academic year, he premiered 13 new works as a part of Flyover New Music Series, UNL Percussion Ensemble, and as a soloist. He's commissioned new works and arrangements from composers such as Robert Honstein, Jonathan Scales, and Marco Shrippa. He is currently in his second year of his master's, a graduate student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where he studies percussion with Dr. Dave Hall and composition with Dr. Greg Simon. He completed his undergraduate work, as I said before, at A&M Commerce, where he was a student of Brian Zader, Dr. David Davies, Dr. Andrew Ling, another friend of ours, Sandy Rennick, Kent Hillman, and JJ Pipitone. So please welcome Louis Raymond-Kolker. How you doing, dude?
I'm good. How are you?
Man, I'm just getting, man, I tell you what, they tell you that the last year, they're just like, yeah, the last year of your DMA, classwork's a little lighter, but, that dissertation's pretty heavy. I'm just like, oh, yeah, I can handle it. Oh, no, it's heavy. It's heavy. Yeah, it gets bad. But no, it's going well. It's just a lot of work. Yeah. How's it over there in Nebraska?
It's good. I'm just starting to get settled into the semester. We had our third week, and it was a 4-day week, and so it was already off to a weird start. But I think from here on out till like fall break, it'll be cruising a little bit more.
Word. That's cool. So for anyone that doesn't know, Lewis's big thing is he's just a killer pan player, in my opinion, and others as well. But in my opinion, he's a killer pan player. He writes a lot of pan music. He's played a lot of pan music, and he's doing this really cool project, what is LNK New Music Collective. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I've seen like the Facebook post of like all these new works coming out for you and Pan. And it's just a cool experience.
Yeah, so LNK formed out of the composition area at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where I'm studying, and it's 5 composers who are all students or alumni from there who just started putting together new concerts of new music, where they're trying to get out into Lincoln and out into the community and a little bit out of like the normal concert hall and academic audiences. So I have 5 pieces that were all commissioned for this project. They're by Josh Spalding, Krista Connolly, Dr. Alicia Arnston, Ian Willick, and Spencer Perkins. And those we're going to present those at bars, the farmers market, coffee shops, just all around town, trying to get new people to experience new music.
Yeah. Man, I tell you what, we did, I was telling Chris earlier, today I played with 3 other grad students here, and Casey has this quintet he wrote, so the 5 of us played it 3 times. It's like an open performing arts day for a community can come in and see how like the concert hall works and sound design and like the theater people, and there's all these different activities. And yeah, it was a contemporary percussion ensemble, but it was like really fun at the end, and there's party poppers that go off, like not like the little ones you buy in like a pack of 50, but like $4 a pop, like mini cannons.
Oh,
and
wow.
it's like so fun. And like, yeah, even though that was like one little aspect that was kind of goofy, the rest of it's like, I feel like a pretty, just a good composition. And everyone's always so hyped, and they have so many, like the non-musical community have so many good questions, and there's such an interest. I feel like, yeah, sometimes we have this thing of, well, I don't think percussion does as much, but there's this thing of like, oh yeah, they're not gonna get it, or they don't want to hear
Hmm.
classical music or contemporary music. But man, often than not, yeah, they find it pretty interesting. Like it's cool stuff, regardless.
Hmm. And I think a big part of that is presenting it in a way where you are expecting them to be receptive, and then you are finding that within your own performance, finding that within the music. Last semester, as part of my recital, I was playing the uh, Paul Lansky piece, Pandemonium, that
Yeah.
Josh Quillen commissioned. And it's like any Paul Lansky piece. It's crazy. There's a lot of chromatic harmony, pretty contemporary sounding. But I played it in public just as, hey, here's a cool piece for double seconds. And I think the more that you can highlight not the obvious things, but the things that are a little bit more palatable to just anybody's ears, I think that's one big thing that we can do just to get people into it, as well as just the paradigm shift of not thinking off the bat that people won't like it, and so we're not going to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Uh, the L&K New Music Collective, are they writing for um, other mediums besides yourself? Is it like many mixed ensembles and stuff?
Not for this one. This one is all just double second solos. And they'll use one of them has like triangle and some of the music extended techniques or four mallets. But that's just for this concert series. I think the next one is saxophone and friends. So it'll be more mixed ensembles.
Cool. Yeah, I saw a short video of you playing double seconds at a farmer's market, I think twice, and there was a triangle set up, if I remember
Hmm.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's rad. I feel like farmer markets are such a cool place. The flute choir here every now and then will go out and do stuff at the farmer's market, and like the saxophone studio will go play at the farmer's market. And yeah, everybody always loves it.
Sounds like
Until,
y'all need
Hmm.
better towns.
yeah, man, I don't know.
What do y'all got? We're going down. We're gonna go check out the farmers market. Might check out some live music. Buy some kale. I don't know.
I will say the one complaint I have about farmers markets, and it's like started recently, is I go and I'm like, okay, I just want to get like, a basket of vegetables. Just give me a
Hmm.
basket of fresh vegetables, and then everybody's like, try my homemade body butter scrub made from real coconut extract from coffee grounds. And it's just like, what? No, I don't want that. I just want like vegetables from a garden or a farm that are like locally grown.
Yeah,
Anyways,
no,
mini ran over.
that's one thing I've noticed is that our farmers market, there's a lot of like boutique looking places where they have like hand painted signs that are all go big red, and it's like, all right, where are the vegetables?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, where's the food?
Yeah. Where'd you get that shirt? Farmers market. Yeah. Cool.
That's funny.
Man, yeah, I feel like your first. Well, I knew you before this, Lewis, but the first big thing I saw from you was you recorded Marco Shrippa's Portraits from a City Window. And like the quality of video, I just remember being like so good. And like the audio is like so good. And it's just
Oh,
a nice
thanks.
representative recording. Did you record that with. I'm totally blanking on the guy's name. The videographer that's doing a lot of stuff.
With not a commerce, no. Um, so the portraits from a city window, I have the full video that I recorded in the concert hall, and then I have a short, like one movement recorded in a parking garage in Austin. And both of those uh, audio I mixed myself, and then Monica Williams is a visual communication major at A&M Commerce, and so she recorded both of those.
Oh, word. Okay, yeah. Man. So are you writing any new works right now? I see stuff pop up now and then.
Yeah, so I just kind of finished. I just finished is a hard word to use about compositions because I don't feel like I ever just finished a piece.
Right.
But I am getting ready to perform a piece that I wrote called Summer Springs. That's an 11-ish minute concertino for double seconds and piano. So it's kind of the three movements of a concerto squished into one continuous form that I'll play on the Flyover New Music series on September 27th in a couple weeks. And then right now I'm working on orchestrating it into a double seconds and orchestra.
Cool. So there'll be like a concerto for double seconds and orchestra?
Yes.
Nice. You played a concerto at Commerce, right? For Pan?
Yeah, so my sophomore year, I did the concerto competition at Commerce with Jamie Whitmarsh's arrangement of Liam Teague's A Visit to Hell,
Yep.
which is originally an unaccompanied tenor pan solo that I learned when I was at McCallum High School in Austin. And then I just kind of reworked it, relearned it, changed some things, and added the piano accompaniment for the concerto competition at Commerce. And that was, I think, the first big competition I did on pan ever, and I won that, which was a bit of a surprise to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I normally don't think Pan concerto, but it's such a cool, I mean, it's a cool idea and a cool medium. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you
And
played any?
the shout out?
No, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, well, the shout out the East Hama video. I know that they were talking about like going into a competition and talking about like not thinking you're going to win and how that's a bit of an advantage because you're just relaxed and you go in and make music. And I was like, well, I'm not going to win the concerto competition on pan, so I may as well go in and play pan and have fun.
Right. Yeah, I like that that keeps coming back, that the people that are doing well at things, it's just like, yeah, I just go in and I like do my thing. I'm not worried about winning or whatever. It's just nice to hear it, that that's kind of the trend and it's the truth. Oh, man.
Yeah.
So at Lincoln, Nebraska, you've had a steel band there for, I guess, 2 years now since you started?
Well, it just started really in the in the spring of last year. It's called Nebraska Steel, and right now it's just made up of the percussion ensemble. So we started rehearsing in February after our second percussion ensemble concert last year, and then it was just like everybody starts learning pan. We're putting together tunes. We have about 10 instruments, so there are two bands between the whole studio. And yeah, that's been a really, really fun project. We just started learning our gig book a couple weeks ago. And so now I think between both bands, we have about 16 tunes that we can play. So we're going pretty 0 to 100 on it, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. What's y'all's rehearsal schedule like per week?
Right now it's just the percussion ensemble rehearsal, so 4:30 to 6 Tuesday, Thursdays. The first couple of weeks we just did steel band and gig book stuff, and now we're moving back into like classical ensembles, and we're gonna have a weekly steel band rehearsal that's TBD right now, or it's just gonna come out of the classical time.
Yeah. I do the steel band here at JMU, and it feels like, and you might agree with this, every fall, the spring goes great. Like there's plenty of time to rehearse, and we have our own time and our own space, and there's like tons of enrollment. But then in the fall, like marching band happens,
Yeah.
and people don't want to
exactly.
add that. I mean, that 1 extra or 2 extra hours a week become like, I mean, it becomes a big deal. Like your time is sinking away. But yeah, I feel like every fall it feels like I start over. Like we had our first rehearsal this week, and it's just like, all right, like new people are here. Some are vets. Some have been playing for like 4 years. Some read music and are playing for the first time. And it's like, all right, we got to start back at square one each fall.
Mhm.
And yeah, it can be tedious.
Yeah, and I definitely experienced that at Commerce. So my sophomore and junior year, I was directing the second steel band, Pan 2, and then my senior year, I was directing the top steel band, Panimation. And enrollment was always great in the spring, but then, like we were saying, that fall semester, it's also just hard to find time to rehearse. Like if you don't have the institutional like schedule support that you know you're going to have at the same hour of the week every semester, it gets tough to even find that time between marching band and drumline sectionals and trying to have outside percussion ensemble rehearsals.
Yeah, I mean, this fall this is the least time I've ever had given to me, and it's no one's fault on their own. It's just the hand we were dealt. But this semester we're
Yeah,
down to an
exactly.
hour a week, and it's just like, oh man, I just stress like, okay, y'all have to like they can't really get to the pans very easily because it's locked up in this room that's separate from the percussion
Mhm.
studio. And so it's just like, yeah, guys, just print off the diagram of your pan or like get the iPad app. There's like a ton of them. Just like at least be
Yeah.
somewhat familiar because man, yeah, you lose a lot in a week if you don't touch up
Mhm.
on it.
I think that's a problem I've always run into right there is like working with pan groups and it's like the mixed interest group. Like,
Mhm.
'cause I know I don't know if it's still this way. When we were at Commerce, we had like the required amount of semesters we had to do pan band, and it's the same way here at CSU. Like everybody has to do a certain amount, and then there's even people that sign up for it willingly, and then like getting everybody to actually practice is always interesting to me.
Hmm.
Like, because I've always enjoyed it. There's been pieces that I've hated that, admittedly, when they're like really tough, and I'm not as familiar with the instrument as I should be, and I'm just like, oh, this is gonna kick my ass today. Like, it's like, but like we'll go in there, and it's the same people, without throwing people under the bus, that I'm watching play things like sharp stick that require you to understand rhythm to at least a above knowledgeable level that cannot figure out how and like work to save their life, and it's
Yeah.
just like because they're terrible sight readers and they're trying their best to sight read on an instrument that they don't look at much. But like, is that a problem you run into with your groups?
I mean, one really nice thing about the group so far is that Dr. Hall is very involved. I mean, he played with the steel band at TCU, he played at the steel band at North Texas. He has his own pans, he plays solo repertoire on them. And so, I think like having a professor there
Yeah,
and that it's not just a grad student or a person, but it feels as real as percussion ensemble and as serious as percussion ensemble is a huge thing. And then what I just started doing this week is I have a couple of applied lessons for pan that I'm teaching. And so with all those kids, I was just like, here's like 3 hours of soca music. Like, go listen to it. You'll play better afterwards.
Hmm.
Like, I think half of the problem with steel band rhythms is that all of them are syncopated. So you get a lot of and and then the other part of the problem is that like it's never actually supposed to sound like that. It's always going to be a little bit swung, a little bit laid back. So when you're so focused on like sharpen stick mode of okay, offbeat, on beat, instead of just and feeling that rhythm. I think just like understanding that it's its own genre and biggest asset I've had is just like listening to the original tunes, just
it's
like you
like
would if you were learning
I
an
say,
orchestral excerpt.
you're like, or that like being like a jazz musician, you just need to listen to the rep,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
just experience it through listening. And I think that's something that I find that I find a mixed group on. I enjoy it. I think it's fun. Like I'm not playing any like crazy panorama charts very often, so I'm not like pushing my pan chops, so to speak. But like just playing like the simple soca stuff. Like to me, it's like when we did it weekly, it was kind of like the nice like shift out of like that serious hardcore like focus mode to go in there and just play music and have fun. And I would see other people that felt the same, and then there's the other people that walk in just dreading it for some reason. They're like, "Oh, I hate this so much." I'm like, "Why?" It's like
Yeah.
everything about this to me is fun. Like I even think about like back when Caleb and I were in the Panimation back at Commerce, and we did that. We were playing soca charts, and we just got like I was playing bass, and you were playing cellos, and we would sit there and like we just kind of look at each other and try to figure out what scales we're going to start playing this time, what walking patterns, or if we're just going to hold the pedal forever.
Yeah, it was good. Good
But
days.
like it was just one of those things where it's like yeah, it's like there's like the style going on, but it's just like a fun communication ensemble to where like you could have those chances to like really reach across and connect and just enjoy what you're doing. And like I could never figure out the people that just stressed it and couldn't like enjoy it, like for what it is. Like my and I hate saying this, but my least favorite thing I'd always hear is like I just hate pan. I hate pan so much. Like why? Like I hear pan and I'm happy. My favorite experience I've ever had with pan was I played with the Cheyenne Symphony up in Wyoming this past year for a Christmas concert. And they specifically hired me to come in because they were looking for somebody that could play pan and they wanted background experience in pan. And so I lied and said that I had extensive background experience in pan because I was like, I'll learn, I'll practice a lot. And I get there and like, it was literally like, it was a cheesy like Christmas Pops concert. I played like the same, there's like 3 different figures that I played on repeat over and over again. I learned the entire piece in 3 minutes and had it to tempo. And I was just like, oh, okay. And so I played on everything else. But I remember at the end of the concert, these old people coming up and were just so enthralled by the pan because they put it up in front of the orchestra like it's going to be this solo feature instrument. And it was not even remotely close. It was almost a flute concerto.
Yeah.
But like they put me up front and stage. I was just like, all right, this is kind of awkward. And we played and these people came up and they're like, well, that's just such a wonderfully exotic sound. How long did it take you to master this instrument? I was just like, I don't know about master, but but even then, like just as simple as it was, they just loved the sound and how enjoyable it was, and it just kind of cracks me up when I find the people that are just so against it. And I was like, I can't figure that out for the life of me. It's almost like I don't like being happy, and I don't like things that sound happy.
So, Chris, you're saying that these people, I know who you're talking about, they're normally like percussion majors, and it happens to all of us when we start getting into pan. It's like you become really competent at this one thing, and then you jump into the world of pan, and like you try to learn lead pan, and you know what the notes on the page are, and you know the rhythms, but there's the barrier. You have to figure out where the notes are, and you have to figure out how it works. So you're kind of back to, not step 1, but you're down to like step 2.
Yeah, I can see that. I think the thing that I always hear is people talk about like the time requirement. I hear a lot of chat about like, and some people it's different. I do believe there are some people that kind of struggle with like getting used to the instrument at first, and I don't think it's necessarily for like the level of stuff that we're playing, especially like the bottom groups, that it's like it takes like an extraordinary amount of time to get there because you're usually playing on one side of the pan because you're like in F, and so I'll hear it's like, yeah, takes a lot of time. And it's like the pans are set up in the practice room and just go in there and you've got like 3 or 4 phrases to learn. And most of them for most of the instruments are pretty repetitive. It's just like one of those things, it's pedagogically just to get you used to playing it. I think it's just a lot of people struggle with that initial first step of going, I've just got to put time into this. Just like anything. It's like when you first get in here, it's like I need to dedicate some time to snare drum and marimba, and then eventually you realize I need to also play some timpani, but then I also probably should practice my tambourine and crash cymbals. I should probably practice triangle, like all these things, and so you're constantly like going to another instrument going, I should probably actually put time into this. And I think it's because in like the classical percussion repertoire, we don't look at it, and it's a weird way to say it, I don't think in the classical percussion repertoire we look at it as like a serious instrument. Mm-hmm. Which I think is kind of detrimental to the growth of like the acceptability of what we could do with it. But I think, and I don't necessarily think it's perpetuated by any educators that I know. I think it's just like one of those like each studio has like their different like kind of like perception of what each instrument is. And I know like in certain schools that I've been at, like it's always been the majority of people that are like, yeah, I'll figure it out eventually. And then when the professor finally steps in and starts listening to the rehearsals, all of a sudden people get serious because they get ripped apart one time and they're like, oh, I should probably have practiced this 3 months ago.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, and I tell the undergrads that I talk to, I'm just like, definitely like do steel band at least once. Because I mean, part of my GA gig here is teaching steel band. And it's like if I hadn't taken the time to at least learn how everything works and learn how it like functions as a group, then that would have probably knocked me out of the running for that, because and steel bands are so popular now at universities. It's like, yeah, I mean, maybe you're not invested now, or like, I mean, I know coming into my undergraduate, I was just like, I'm going to get my undergrad, then I'm going to go be a band director. And that didn't pan out. I went down the performance route and looking at the professor world, and it's just like, yeah, like that pan experience paid off. Yeah, big time for sure.
Yeah, I mean, jumping back to what Chris was saying about instrument perception, I think part of it is what you're saying is like thinking of it as a serious instrument. And one thing that I've started doing with that is just backing up from the like serious versus pop or not serious dichotomy that I see a lot of parallels with like drum set in that realm where it's like, oh, like you just need to play drum set if you want to make money and play gigs and play in a rock band or a country band. You don't actually need to know it. Which like that comparison to drum set can be helpful because I know a lot of serious percussionists also care about drum set because they see the value in it. But then even just asking the question of like, so if I were to do this on another instrument, would I do it on this instrument too? Or if I were to not do this on another instrument, would I not do it here? So like, I know a lot of people don't learn their scales on pan, but you would on marimba or any other keyboard instrument. And it's like, if you're not getting the same answer for two different instruments, if there's not a good reason, then you can flip your ideas on that. I know I was working with Diana Loomer on her melodic timpani project, and she was taking the same approach that I'm taking to pan to timpani, where she was saying like, well, I mean, I can do this, so why aren't people doing it?
Yeah, right. So speaking of Diana Loomer, can you tell us a little bit about the piece you wrote for her? Because again, it was the melodic timpani project, and it's crazy rap. If anyone hasn't heard of it, definitely look it up.
Oh man, yeah, this was so much fun to write. So part of what I did, I know Diana mostly through kind of the Austin steel band scene. She just finished her doctorate at UT, University of Texas, and I saw her at Tacet at Victor Provost's showcase concert, and she participates in Inside Out Steel Band, which is very much part of where I grew up as a pan player. And for her dissertation and for one of her final recitals, she commissioned a bunch of pieces for like timpani solo that could be a melodic application of timpani. If you haven't seen her play, like go look up some videos. She is the reference recording on Sathas's Planet Damnation, and her feet are crazy. So I was talking to her at PASIC, and she was telling me about this project and wanted a timpani solo for it. And I was like, yeah, like I'd be honored. I'd love to write for you. And so I started thinking about some stuff, and I had some kind of pitch shifting, minimalist ideas where it was a lot of like common tone chord progressions. And I went with that for a little bit, and I was like, you know, this is just timpani music, and I want to write something totally not about timpani. So instead, I just went with like 3 nature scenes in like an urban setting. So one is wind, like picking up leaves in a spiral and then dropping them. And then one is plate tectonics happening under the ground the whole time. And then the last idea is how people breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, and plants breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. And so that shared breath of the earth became the piece. And it was just, all of those had inherent kind of melodic and different pitched ideas. And I just layered them on top of each other. And I tried not to think about playability to the levels that I could. And she wound up making like a chart of every single tuning change in every single measure of the piece. And there were 202 within the like 5-ish minutes, a little under 5 minutes of the piece.
Man.
And yeah, she was getting right back into town for her semester as I was leaving Austin to start my spring semester in like early January. And so I had a like 1-hour workshop meeting with her, and she's like, yeah, sorry, just getting back into town, haven't played in a bit, I've looked at the piece, but I haven't touched it on the instruments yet. And then she's like sight reading the chromatic scales that I wrote in there. So she's an insane player. And this was not even the hardest piece that I wrote, but it was a really good way to just like break my expectations of timpani and see how excited she got about it. because her whole thing is like, the pedals are there, why aren't we using them?
Right.
And I was like, like, I try to think of myself as open-minded when it comes to new music and about percussion instruments, and I definitely feel that way on Pan, but I definitely thought of timpani as the Soldo machines, and now I don't.
Right. Yeah, so if anyone that's listening, is anybody listening? Call in at the hotline if we don't have, we need to get a hotline for people to call into. I know we do it after the fact, but you can call in and
it should just be the number to Wingstop though.
that's the only number that unless Lewis, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Hey Lewis, remember that time we went to California and I was excited you were there and invited you to brunch and we went to a barbecue place?
I do remember that.
And awesome. Then I remembered after we got there that wasn't the best place for you and I felt horrible.
I remember having a good brunch there, though. I think I got
leave it to California to have a vegan option for a barbecue place.
That's good, man. So you were talking about this imagery with your piece you wrote for Diana, and I have some titles. Lewis has 3 pieces with C. Allen as well. Under a Hazy Moon for solo pan, Restless Little Star for vibes, and Numerologies for violin and tenor pan. And it feels like all of your music, I don't want to say programmatic, but it has this like very visual element to it. Like the music relates to the title very well. Like you can kind of see that depiction. Do you go for that all the time?
Yeah, I do. So 3 of my other kind of more recent pieces that I'm trying to get out in the world right now are The Shared Breath of the Earth, the timpani solo I was just talking about. One called A Vast Expanse that I thought of actually on that drive from Texas to Nebraska, just like seeing up 10 hours of I-35, like there's one tree just doing its thing. And then 5 hours later, there's another tree doing the same thing as the first one. And it's just like amazing how this network of plants are just like communicating and living the same life over distances. And then Flowers and Foliage with a tenor pan for 3 of the movements, and then like wood planks and sandpaper for the other 2 movements, as this kind of bouquet of how in like floral arranging there are like colorful flowers, and then there's just like weird twigs that don't really look like they make sense, but they add this contrast to the flowers. And so those are 3 of the more recent pieces that all have this like plant imagery that I was just feeling over winter in Nebraska when everything was kind of dead.
Dave Hall, I feel like his music too has that same like imagery. Like I feel like this architecture, his quartet. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the building.
Escape Velocity.
Oh. Yeah. Like it has this, the music represents the title. They tie together so well, and it's very, yeah. Is that part of the reason you went to study with him? Was because his composition experience?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, I was hedging my bets a little bit because I thought that I wanted to study composition, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that as a degree program or just go and study with a composer for percussion. So I really enjoyed his writing as well as his teaching and his playing. And so I went to study with him. And then from that, just he has such a holistic, artistic approach to music where it's not just the notes, but the art and the imagery and the food and the buildings that surround him. And so I am trying to pick up on that as much as I can while I'm here.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel myself, from a writing perspective, not so much drawn to specific imagery or things or experiences, but maybe experiences, but like trying to phrase this in a way that makes sense to people that'll hear it. But just like an idea or like a concept, or even just an emotion. Like my marimba solo, Malice, is just angry. And the name came way after the piece was done. and it was just
Mhm.
like the whole piece is this, and like I feel like a lot of the time my titles come after. Like
Mhm.
I know what it could be, and I know what the adjective to describe the title would be, but I don't quite have the title. But I know like it's there. It just has to be uncovered.
Mhm.
I just always thought it was be like you played Mortal Kombat and you're like, oh, that'd be kind of a neat word.
Yeah, finish him for solo marimba. Man, you know who's the hardest guy in Mortal Kombat? Is Goro, the forearm dude. It's not even Shao Kahn. It's not even the head honcho. It's Goro, the dude you fight before Shao Kahn.
It's because they cheat.
He's hard. He's basically fighting two people. It's like fighting two people at once because his health bar goes down half as fast.
It's true.
I'm
It's
telling
true.
you, we need to have a video games episode.
It's Marco.
That'll
We'll
number
get him on.
one. Yeah, we'll get
You
everybody.
can get Marco on for that.
Yeah, that's what I just
Yeah,
said.
Marco stayed with me for a few days last spring, and like he made me buy Rocket League, and we like played that. I was just like, dang man, you know your games. It's good. Um, so this is a kind of a sidetrack, but we were talking about Pan earlier. So for anybody
Mhm.
listening, this will be for y'all. It will be last week. For us, we're Saturday on the 8th, so it'll be this past week. But yeah, Ellie Manette passed away on the 31st, I think. Sometime this past week. I can't remember the exact date. But I just typed up a little about him just because he's so important to Pan, and Lewis plays a lot of Pan, and he's doing a lot of cool stuff with Pan. So I thought it would be a nice way to tie the two together. So he did pass away from kidney failure in West Virginia. He was 90 years old, and he definitely had a very long and very fulfilled life, which is great. So yeah, I thought this would be a good time to tie it in because when I mentioned Ellie Minette's passing to other people that aren't so involved in Pan, I was a little surprised that they kind of knew the name or they saw the name on like Pans now and then, but they didn't quite know who he was. So for anyone that's listening that might not know who Ellie Minette was, he was born in Trinidad and developed a skill with metalworking in his youth, and that would eventually lead him to help evolve the world of steel pan. So, depending on who you ask, you may get different answers. I've looked at a lot of places and I found a lot of different opinions and thoughts. So, I can't say this is the hard truth, but I can say I've seen this one the most. But it's said that uh, Ellie is said to have been the first person to use discarded oil barrels to build steel pans. He sank the lids in to create a tensed playing surface and fired the metal to improve the acoustic properties. So prior to this, pans were mostly made from biscuit tins or soap boxes that had a much smaller range and I assume a much more indefinite pitch, not tuned to how we tune them now. In 1951, the TASPO, which is the Trinidad All Steel Percussion Orchestra, went to Great Britain to present a new musical instrument, the steel pan, to a festival in Britain. And Minette was a member of that band as well as a tuner for the pan orchestra, which consisted of basically the band was made up of leaders of different Trinidadian steel bands in the area. So all the leaders got together to make this one like all-star band to go out and spread the word of pan and what was going on. A little before that, back a few years, in 1948, Ellie was also extended a scholarship to go study music in London, but he turned it down to be able to keep working on his pans and building these pans and developing them. In the 60s, he went to New York City to build instruments for Inner City Youth Program. This invitation in NYC was extended by Murray Norell, who you probably recognize that last name. Murray Norell was a New York social worker, and he is the father of Andy Norell, who many of you probably know as a prominent figure in the steel pan world. At this time, Ellie was also tuning instruments by ear, which is obviously not an easy thing to do. But then when he came to New York, he began learning more about concert pitch A440 and the use of strobe tuners, and then he started incorporating that into his work. Since then, Ellie had been building hundreds of steel pans for bands all over the U.S., mainly in colleges and universities, but also at some private institutions, including the U.S. Navy Steel Band. In 1991, he was invited by West Virginia University to show interested students how to build and play pans, which is kind of funny because Chris and I'm not sure if you know him, Lewis, but Brody Ross, he teaches at Roy City, which is kind of near Dallas. He's actually had some of his students start to build pans out of these old oil drums, and it's a really cool thing they're doing.
Cool.
But with Manette, what was initially a one-semester guest lecturing position turned into a long-term relationship called the University Tuning Project. And then that project itself turned into his company, Manette Steel Drums. So Ellie has developed many steel drum instruments in the steel pan family. His use of whole tone scale on 2 drums has become widely common standard. He was the first to fashion a steel drum that had all the notes of the chromatic scale, so it could be used to play in any key. He had a vision for evolution of this instrument that no one else had yet imagined, or at least had yet had great success in creating. To make a comparison I had to look up a little bit of this because I was curious, to make a comparison of how much success he had developed on steel pan instruments. The earliest hard evidence of violins are paintings by Gaudenzio Ferrari from the 1530s, and they are preceded by instruments such as the Byzantine instrument the lyra, L-I-R-A, or sometimes called lura, L-U-R-A, which is just a held bowed instrument, as well as the lyra de braccio, which is an evolution of that instrument that you can see in the 1914 to 20 volumes of Michael Pretorius's Syntagma Musicum, which is basically a collection of books where he describes and draws to scale representations of period instruments. Also has a lot of common area percussion instruments in there, so you can see like period nakers and all these different percussion instruments drawn to scale of how they are sized compared to each other. But all this led from these early not 19th, but 9th century early models of instruments that evolved over 100 of years to become the standard violin in the 1530s, which was then improved on as we move through history. So if you think about pan, through Elie Manette's assistance, we're able to evolve from basically dented up biscuit tins to fully chromatic instruments in about 50 years. And of course you have to take into account mechanical things, his tuning process, technology, and then just general discoveries in music that were made before him and tuning schemes. But the point I'm trying to get at is that it's kind of crazy that one person helped push an instrument to prominence just in the span of his life, where that had not really happened before outside of a few aspects of music. If you think about Schoenberg and serialism, Reich and minimalism, they've done that. The only instrument that I could really find was obviously Adolphe Sax, creating the saxophone, and he kind of did a lot of that work in his lifespan, and then they improved on it later, similar to Manette. So should Elie Manette be considered a staple of music history canon? With the rising prominence of steel pans in all genres of music, from the music band Kehoe to Jonathan Scales playing this new fusion style to these concertos for pan, and just the culture behind it, I would definitely say yes. I feel like Elie Manette has contributed. Yeah, it's just so much. It's just insane. Like he took something from biscuit tin to fully concerto-ready instrument in one lifespan, and that's kind of crazy because that hasn't happened in many other instruments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I never interacted with him personally, but he is the one who taught Emily Lemmerman, who is based in Austin, Texas, and she tunes literally all over the world, and she tunes the pans at Commerce that we all played on. She's the one who imported the drums that I have and tuned them up pretty much from scratch. So she's great, and I know, like, if it weren't for him, in a very, very tangible way, my life would be pretty different from how it is now.
Right, absolutely, man. Yeah. Yeah, when you think about just the state of pan and how common it is now, and you're starting to see them, and it's funny enough, here in Virginia, some elementary schools have pan ensembles. And it's kind of cool because, I mean, I feel like it's so approachable. Because, I mean, the instrument's laid out in a way, and they're they're not always like you don't have the full-size tenor pan, you have like the reduced, so maybe it's like a pan that's in like just C. but they're dealing with
Mhm.
just the C scale, and they can do these different compositions, and it's really cool. But that's kind of my question I wanted to ask you, Lewis. Do you have any opinion on Pan uh, as far as just the future of Pan education goes? Because I feel like we
Oh,
talked about earlier a little bit about how I feel like it's one of those things. It's kind of like tabla, like you can learn the fundamentals of tabla, but to be a master
mhm.
of tabla, you have to like dedicate yourself to it. I feel like it's kind of the same with like Jonathan Scales. Like, man, I'll never play as well as Jonathan Scales plays Pan. No way. It's just not gonna happen. There's just so many other things I have to do.
Yeah.
And it's great that he's doing that. But yeah, do you have any thoughts about like Pan and colleges or like where we should take it or your personal thoughts? Just curious.
Y- Yeah. I mean, I think the best thing that we can do is take it seriously and treat it with respect. And part of that is not just letting it be the half hour before rehearsal, I'm going to try and find my notes instrument, but we did kind of radical things when we started the steel band here. And I was talking to Dr. Hall about this right when we were getting the first pans. And he was like, so should we write in the notes? Like, we're not going to write in the notes. We're not going to do it. So actually, none of the instruments at the school have note names written in, which is pretty rare in universities in America. I feel like most programs I've seen, they have all the notes written on the instrument.
Ours
And
do.
his argument
Yeah.
for that was you don't write in the notes on the marimba, you don't write in the notes on the vibes, and it's a safety net. And if you take away the safety net with smart college age musicians, like they'll just figure out how to go without it. And so our way of teaching the instruments has been a lot more of the like theory and construction approach. So how a lead or tenor pan is laid out in the circle of fourths and fifths, with C at 6 o'clock and F sharp at 12 o'clock, or the two whole tone scales that make up the double seconds. So you can think of the chromatic scale between the two of them, or any like combination of whole tones, like a major second, major third, tritone will all be in the same pan. Or the diminished chords in the guitars, or the fifths in the bass. That's been one thing that we've done, as well as just like the first thing everybody had to do before we even started learning easy tunes was they had to play all 12 of their major scales.
Ooh.
And yeah, I mean, there were grad students and doctoral students who were as freaked out as the freshmen that had never played pan before, because that just wasn't the expectation. But I think that's one key part of taking it seriously. And the other is just like understanding that it's not a novelty instrument. It's just an instrument that doesn't come from Western European culture. And so it does have a pretty substantial history. And if you watch any video of any panorama group, like they're killing it, they're taking it seriously. And then just trying to understand and sink into that culture. Like what I'm doing right now with the LNK stuff and my little concerto and all that is not the most representative thing of what pan is most places or most of the time. But I do my best to just like tell people that and show them how I'm using it and why I'm using it the way I am, and not pass it off as like I'm inventing classical pan music, because I'm not.
Right.
And then the other thing that I think of is just like other ways to wrap your mind around the instrument, is that there's so few good like tuned metallophones in percussion. I mean, you have bells and crotales that are so high in register that they're not that useful for solo writing, just as a standalone instrument. And vibes are really great because of the pedal, but then they can be really irritating sometimes because of the pedal. And I think Lindsay was saying this a couple of weeks ago when she was talking about her solo vibe stuff.
Right.
With like a lead pan or double seconds, it's the only like kind of pure metallic tune sound that we get as percussionists, and it's closer sound-wise and capability-wise to a metal marimba than a vibe is in some ways. So I think as composers start writing for pan, wrapping their brains around like the extended techniques, or just thinking of it as a metallic keyboard-like timbre that's just laid out in a different way, I think there's a lot of neat stuff that you can do with it.
For sure. I totally agree. Do you have any thoughts? I've gotten crap for this one. So again, like I was saying, I mean, sometimes like this semester we get an hour a week and we have to do a concert that's just us at the end of the semester. So I very often go to avoid having to do like the standard or traditional island tunes over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I normally just I arrange pop tunes myself. Do you have any thoughts about man, it's such a messy topic. I don't want to say appropriation.
Whether you should.
Yeah, it's like whether you should.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it. I think what it comes down to for me is just doing it respectfully and doing it with understanding. So I arranged when I was at Commerce, and I was arranging for like the younger, like the less experienced band with a lot of non-music majors and non-percussionists, as I would arrange like Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande tunes, because they're in that genre of pop music that's imitating soca. And I was like, well, if it's a soca tune, it's going to sound good in a steel band. And if anything, it's kind of like reclaiming the music in the genre that they're taking from. So that's how I kind of rationalized it for myself. And the other advantage is that like these American like kind of fake soca tunes usually just have a chord progression all the way through and a couple form changes, but they're really good educational tools. I will plug real quick, Boxfish Music is run by CJ Mengi, Emily Lemmerman, who we talked about, and Matt Ehlers. And the three of them are based in Austin, and we run elementary and middle school and high school aged kids from 0 to steel band in 5 days. And so they're always composing pedagogic rep for the instruments that isn't so much like, I'm going to write an island-ish sounding tune that my kids can learn in a week, but just trying to think about the physicality of the instrument as well as like the brains of an 11-year-old trying to learn a new piece.
Right.
And still trying to write music that doesn't sound condescending. Is Emily's way of putting it. And so I think those have been a good asset. And I think more and more composers are getting into that realm of writing for people who are musically experienced and literate, but just not used to the instrument. And then as far as arranging goes, I think another way to get out of just like island tunes or just random pop tunes is I listen for anything that has a lot of rhythmic layering, because that is what's going to sound not best, but maybe most characteristic of a steel band. And so I'm always listening for like on my Spotify Discover, if I hear an indie tune with like a cool inner synth line, I'm like, oh, that's going to sound cool in a steel band. And then I try it out, and sometimes it does, and a couple times it hasn't. But I think just being willing to experiment with it and do like, random indie bands.
I think a good positive of that too is it kind of makes the instrument more relatable to the current like student audience you have too, though. Like, because it can like generally build interest to wanting to expand more vocabulary on the instrument. And because I know we did a lot of pop charts at Commerce when we were there, and like we had a lot of fun doing it. Got interested in playing more, and I did enjoy playing the more soca style. But I think about like same thing I've done with like Brazilian percussion ensembles I've taught, where we'll learn these styles and we'll try to keep it traditional, but then we kind of add in like a little bit of like maybe like American funk style or something like that, just to make it groovy in a way that we're used to it being. And And I've caught slack for that before, but then I always go back to thinking about like, it's like we're not a samba school. Like I'm not trying to make a samba school here. I'm just trying to teach a basic understanding and appreciation for what this is. But I think back to like one of my favorite Brazilian groups to listen to is Mano Bloco, which is like, it's a traditional like Brazilian percussion ensemble setup that's very like funk, hip hop, and like pop oriented in Brazil, and they're like rock stars down there, and they'll play very traditional Brazilian Portuguese music, but then like during their percussion breaks, all of a sudden they're playing the exact rhythm from like Rush's YYZ. Like, they're borrowing from our influence as well. And it's like, and I think it's maybe the setting and the audience that you have. Like, maybe I'm not going to take, if I somehow found myself with a steel band down in like Trinidad and Tobago, I'm not going to play an Earth, Wind, and Fire like arrangement. Probably, that's probably not the right place for it. And if I'm playing, here at like just some random venue, like let's say the the farmers market, let's bring that back up. And you could probably get away with playing some of that stuff, but like maybe people like it and they enjoy it for a second. But if you catch their ears, if you throw in something they recognize, maybe it draws them in more to actually listen further.
Yeah, I know Jonathan Scales was talking about that. He does one cover on like any set that he does, usually mostly for like the bar crowd, because he does crazy genre bending, time signature, weird modes and scale stuff. And then he'll play Kiss from a Rose by Seal.
Yeah.
And everybody perks up and they love it. And it's just like, you have to manage your audience. You have to manage, if you're a steel band in a school, you have to manage your students and the faculty. And, in a high school, you have to manage what the parents want to. There's so many factors to take in that you can't please everybody, but you just try and have something for everybody.
Yeah, if you haven't heard Jonathan Scales' Kiss from a Rose, he came through here last summer, and I got to go see him. It will blow your mind. It's the coolest thing ever. Man.
I will say I'm a huge Jonathan Scales fan, and so probably by the time this episode is out, his new album Pillar will be out, because that's dropping September 14th. I'm a big fan of him and what he's doing, and the roster on that album is just obscene. I mean, Sean Martin, Mono Neon, Bela Fleck, Victor Wooten, more people that I don't know off the top of my head. If you want to understand anything about my writing or my influence, Jonathan Scales is one of the big ones. And I think he's making big strides on pushing Pan, not because he's trying to push Pan, but just because he's making music and doing his thing, and that happens to be on Pan. I know it's a weird parallel, but he's not going out of his way to push the instrument. He's just doing his thing. Sounds a lot to me and feels a lot to me. Just like when I was in that concerto competition, I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to force Pan on people. I was just trying to like go and play music and have a good time.
Yeah, for sure. So if anyone hasn't seen, Lewis has two really cool, I call them databases on his website, but they're through Spotify. So if you go to his website, which is LewinRaymond-Kolker.com, LewisRaymond-Kolker.com, sorry, that's LouisRaymondKolker.com. It's two projects. One is the BPM key playlist. So it's literally, you want a track at 120, there's a list of tunes where the tempo is 120. So it's great for snare drum. I've always been a big fan of that. I use tunes as opposed to metronomes when I'm doing snare drum.
Same.
Honestly, I think it made my time better, because I'm not listening to a steady click. I'm listening to like music, like a phrase, and I'm like pulling the info from it rather than being like spoon-fed the tempo. I mean, that might not be accurate, but that's what I feel. It's really helpful. It's on his website, and there's Spotify playlist. there's also the BPM key list. So there's a list of tunes in C major, D flat major, D major, through all the scales. So if you're doing like mallet warm-ups, especially any high school, middle school teachers, if you're working on that C major scale, pop on a C major tune, you're good to go. But I did find out when I was looking at this earlier, and I'll unplug my headphones so you can hear it. So there's Spotify gives you a little sample playlist, so it won't play the whole song on his website, but it'll give you the link to it. It'll play like little samples of it. And I tried to play Pompeii Bastille, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to check out this Britney Spears one. And they start playing at the same time. So, take a listen to this. You get them all playing at the same time. You have like in C or in B flat, but it's crazier. Isn't that fantastic? That is amazing. That's the best thing I have ever heard. I love it. So that's that. That's really fun to do, by the way. I would recommend everyone your speakers and do that once before you save the playlists. But yeah, I really like the playlist. I've used the BPM ones on Spotify, and it's a great resource he curated. So yeah, thanks for giving that to us, Lewis. That's so
no,
helpful.
I was happy to. That was while I was supposed to be writing the concerto, and I just really was not getting productive on it. And I was like, how can I procrastinate for like a whole week? And that's what I did.
Yeah, it's really, really helpful. Yeah, and again, it's so nice to break up the Doctor beat with some Taylor Swift or some Train or Toto or something.
You can practice your Mozart magic flute with a little bit of Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, if anybody didn't see, it went pretty viral, dude. Chris had a video of him playing magic flute to Drop It Like It's Hot. Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Man, yeah, it went viral last year.
Like 30,000 or something.
I think it's like
I thought it was like 50 or 60,000 views.
I still get notifications about it daily.
Good, man. I'm proud.
If I was smart, I would have put it on YouTube.
Man, yeah, dude, Lewis, this was great. It was great to talk Pan and just talk composition and like what's going on. It's so interesting, yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's fun to talk about the things that I am doing all the time anyways.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Next up, we'll get together at B-Dubs, order some wings, get some beers.
Oh, yeah, wings, steaks, all the meats.
If anyone hasn't caught on, the joke is Lewis is vegan and Chris always forgets and invites them to like a barbecue joint or Buffalo Wild Wings or something.
I always feel bad, somewhat. But then I have wings, so I'm happy.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, if you're looking for new music, please check out Lewis's music. It's really good. It's unique. It's colorful. It's very. Yeah, I think unique is the best word. It's just got its own character that's very different from a lot of other stuff that's going on out there. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next week when we have the legend. It's not okay. It's not funny if I say the legend if you don't know him, but I'll say it anyways. The legend, the hero, Dr. Andrew Ling of Jacksonville State University. So if you're listening, you know who he is. It's funny. If you don't, just tune in.
He's really not.
Yeah, you could probably tune in. I need the views. I need the self-esteem boost. All right, so thanks everybody, and we'll catch y'all next time.